Recording in progress.
Okay, cool. All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Wednesday, August 21st, Trinidad City Planning Commission meeting. We'll begin with a roll.
Commissioner Flynn.
Here.
Commissioner Cole.
Here.
Commissioner Hickman.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Commissioner
Here. All right, moving on. Approval of the minute, May 15th. We do not have yet, but we have July 17th in front of us. Were there any changes any of the commissioners saw to the July 17th meeting they wanted to make? Be now and forever hold your peace.
Can I ask what the status of the May minutes is? Or is there just delayed?
it was Gabe that was at that meeting and he's been behind on minutes. But
That's fine.
Like hours in it, right?
I did not see anything that jumped out at me. Anybody, anything? Not then entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Move to approve.
Second. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, passes unanimously. Now that brings us to approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any changes any of the commissioners or members of the public would like to see to the order of tonight's agenda? See anybody running to the podium? Nobody here super anxious, nobody online. All right, then back to a motion to approve the agenda.
To approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor, aye? Aye. Okay, unanimous. All right, moving on now to items from the floor. This is an opportunity for members of the public that are present to speak on an item that's not on tonight's agenda. You have 3 minutes. We ask that you approach the podium or raise your hand or unmute yourself in Zoom world. And now is your opportunity again for items not on tonight's agenda. All right, not seeing anybody online or in person. Then we will proceed with tonight's agenda, which is agenda item number 1. Trevor, take it away.
all right, so this is your monthly report on the Van Wyck Trail. So since the last meeting, as you know, the city council did approve the proposed pedestrian improvements on Edward Street that were presented last month. And city staff were able to meet with the Ancestral Society who supported the project. So the city has been working with a contractor who's doing the HSIP project around town currently to add that project as part of that contract. So those will get implemented later this summer. In terms of the trail closure itself, the city council appointed 2 representatives to meet with the Europe Tribe and Ancestral Society in government-to-government meetings to discuss their concerns about the trails so they can better understand what that means, what that is, before making a decision on the long term.
All right, I have one question just kind of on this general topic. This G2G meeting that's been requested, has it been scheduled yet? I guess and the reason I'm asking is because it comes before us again in September, and it would be super helpful to know that that has happened and have some report outs that we know what has or has not happened before it comes back to us. So if it's not scheduled, is there a way to perhaps encourage and at least express our desire to have some feedback with which to make a more informed decision?
Sure. I did right after the council meeting, I did suggest that sooner rather than later. So the essence, both on for the Van Wyck Trail, but also with the Rancheria on the Axel Lindgren Trail as well. So it suggests that. I think Cheryl understands, although she's not the one scheduling, but I know it does take time. The tribal councils don't meet that often. So that's why I suggest that, I think we're going to have to propose another closure because I don't think that's going to happen.
Any other questions on the Van Wyck Trail?
We have a couple questions or comments, I think, in some combination of things for staff and also to discuss amongst ourselves. I wanted to begin with something very closely related to what you just mentioned, which is the fact that the council is having government-to-government meetings with the tribal entities. And I was wondering I was really quite impressed actually with how decisive the council's action was on the trail closure that went before them at their previous meeting. And I was wondering, what our role is in whatever action item is going to be discussed to prolong the closure of the Van Wyck Trail. And I was wondering if maybe, since their action was so decisive and really effective, and I think in a way that's pleasing to all of us, whether there's a way to sort of shunt that action item towards them instead of having another sort of spin our wheels type of meeting.
You're talking about when it comes before us again in September, potentially?
Yeah, because I feel like once again, we're gonna have presumably some amount of important information inaccessible to us that perhaps the council will have. Once again, it's a rather complex issue that involves a bunch of stakeholders and the planning commission, including the coastal commission, including tribal entities. The coastal commission has formed opinions on this sort of thing, right? So it seems to me like it's going to be another one of these sort of exercises in futility where it comes before us and we make decisions without all available information, when maybe again the council is better suited for that discussion.
Thoughts? Commissioners?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head, I think. It is a little frustrating. It's also my understanding that the protocol for government to government consultation is pretty strict in terms of who participates and who doesn't.
And what gets reported.
And what gets reported, I'm sure. I guess my only comment would be that it would be very useful for the two representatives from the city council who've been appointed for this consultation, that maybe they would be willing to share with us their observations, comments, information as far as they can go. And I could be wrong on how much they can say at this point, but I agree. It would be nice to hear somewhat from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Given that, by the way, who I forget who are the two appointees.
Jack and Steve.
Yes, I knew Steve. I didn't. Jack. Okay,
And Jack West.
that's what. That's yeah. Okay. So I guess my request would be to try to provide as much transparency as possible under the circumstances that they report to us, and have a discussion. Now it's a report about, what our next moves are going to be. I can think.
That's up to the city council.
Well, I don't know that it's absolutely a city council issue. I mean, if we request and they volunteer, that would be very useful. They certainly up to them to decide. I don't think we're breaking any protocols or any rules or anything like that by requesting.
No, and I did hear, I watched the tape from last week's council meeting. Thank you for you guys for being able to attend in person. And I felt like I did hear a commitment from the council, perhaps a better understanding that they do have an obligation to report out from these G2G meetings that's different from what they thought they were able to. So I'm hopeful that going forward, there's going to be communication about things that can be communicated. What that will be worth in the future. But to your point, Chris, I think, I agree. You kind of hit the nail on the head. I think that's going to be really interesting discussion when this comes before us. Sounds like next month again, kind of more detailed discussion on the actual action item and what we want to do that day.
I don't know if they'll have had the G2G by then.
The other thing, of course, is that the city council will meet before our next meeting. So the unlikely event that they do have their meeting, hopefully they would report out at that point. And so we might be able to get need to at least consider as part of our discussion. But certainly it's up to all the parties in play as to when that meeting happens. So we'll see.
Well, I guess to Chris's point, can we fund the whole project to the?
I would be interested to know the thoughts from the entire planning commission on that. I don't know. I'd have to talk to the city attorney and look at the code a little bit more closely about, the city council does designate their land use authority to the planning commission. They can take that back, but it might also depend on how the code's written and who has to act on a CDP. But I can certainly have a conversation with the city attorney about that if as a whole agrees that. It's not necessarily usually recommended. I think that the planning commission has more land use expertise in general. But I think this is kind of a unique case and involves more political ramifications of the G2G meetings and cultural impacts and liability and insurance and staff time and funding.
I would agree with your statement that it's much more political than it is use oriented at this point. I guess my thought is there could be, the last time this trail closure came before us, it was barely voted passed, and that could change. I would assume that the city would again appeal that decision if that's what happens, which maybe that's good to go through that exercise, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think this is all good discussion. I think it's gonna be very interesting discussion at the next meeting when this is actually agendized and, we can delve deeply into this, we're kind of flirting a little bit here, I feel, in that territory. So I would just kind of maybe, as a commission, do we want to ask Trevor to find out if there are other options, or do we feel that there are options available to us that with the normal process, we can always defer at the next, we don't have to act on it. We can ask for more information at that point. If we don't have what we need to make a decision, I don't think that personally, I don't feel a need to do that tonight necessarily. Because we could be pleasantly surprised and there could be a scheduling, just, alignment that worked and we really get something along, right? It
could be possible.
Could happen, right? Does that work for everybody? Or
Yeah, I think obviously we find ourselves in kind of a, stuck between a rock and hard spot in some ways. But on the other hand, it's important though to keep the record and have the record of all of our actions. So I guess I'm inclined at this point, unless something change based on some view of the law, that we would still have to participate, even though we may continue to object to the actions that are in front of us. But I think it's important to still have that.
Okay, that's a fair point. Yeah.
I have a couple more questions and comments for staff. The next one is for some combination of Trevor and Eli. And I think my redundant and repeated statements that trail closures are not maintenance and therefore probably not consistent with policy 64 are well documented. And so to be consistent in applying that opinion, I just wanted to ask whether there was any ongoing maintenance of the Van Wyck trail.
And the trail is closed, so there is no ongoing maintenance.
Okay. Is it closed to the public? Is it closed to public works staff? I mean, is there any maintenance whatsoever? I guess you answered the question, so we're good.
I mean, the only thing is, there is the pipeline project, which is moving the Van Wyck water line to Edward Street. So whatever the construction company would be doing would be the only thing that would happen between the two chains, let's say, closed trail.
So maintenance of the trail itself
Right.
by city staff.
Yeah.
And I've got one more thing. And I think, I'm trying not to speak on behalf of the other commissioners here, but I know that there's been in these meetings some displeasure with repeated discussions of Edward Street as an alternative to the Van Wyck Trail. And so my personal opinion would be that we need not hear about Edward Street updates in part of the Van Wyck Trail updates. Just to sort of acknowledge that opinion that at least superficially separate project.
I would second that.
I mean, I would say that, I mean, that's fine, but, you know, the Coastal Commission has really been pushing for pedestrian improvements on Edwards as mitigation for the temporary. So in that sense, even as a temporary closure, it is related because otherwise there's not good safe access from the other part of town to.
I think it's important that we acknowledge that that's a mitigation, maybe a temporary mitigation. I'm not sure. I want the public to think that we're contemplating it as a long-term solution if we're really not contemplating a long-term solution. I don't know that we are or not, to be honest with you. But there's a possibility that is interpreted that we are contemplating it as a long-term alternative to Van Wyck Trail. We keep getting these updates.
I may add to that.
Please, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, what Trevor was saying is correct. We've been having monthly meetings with the local coastal commission staff, and they see a connection between the two. Otherwise, connecting, you know, whether we do improvements on Edwards to whether or not Van Wyck is going to be closed, we're looking at it as doing two improvements. Well, when I say two, we're looking at it separately. We're looking at it that Edward Street needs to be safer for people to go there. And the fact that if Van Wyck is closed in the long term, then the improvements on Edwards would about moving people, like Trevor was saying, from one side to the other. Otherwise, the city, and that's part of the reason why we're the ones who are requesting to have the G2G meetings with both the Yurok tribe and with the Chura Ancestral Society. And the purpose of that is to just see what can we do with Van Wyck, either moving it upslope or making light improvements where it exists or whatever. We're trying to flesh out from their viewpoint what can be done. So we're pursuing both, and it's not like doing Edwards in lieu of Van Wyck.
I have nothing else on that item.
I just have a comment on that. Personally, I absolutely hear your frustration and share the sentiment that I personally would like to not see that become a permanent fix. From a commission standpoint, if the applicant wants to update us with their temporary mitigations, it's the applicant kind of providing that information back to it is how I view it more than, if it were a different project and less, didn't have such a lengthy a history, I'd be interested to hear update from the applicant. And in essence, I kind of view them as that because the city is the applicant for this CDP and this closure. But I kind of just, I don't know, just my take on that. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I think those both, you guys are both making good points, but I just appreciate Chris's, I guess, restating that we don't want that to be viewed as a substitute in the law. So I think it's just said maybe every time. Just so that way, no one, the public thinks that at least Chris and I think different.
Thank you.
Yes. I just want to note that there was some public comment and question on this one. It came later in the afternoon, and I've printed out a copy so they had it in front of them. And it speaks to two of the agenda items tonight from Kathleen Lake and just Kathleen. Okay. And she raises some questions just about the transparency, and I don't know if to absolutely put you on the spot, Trevor, but these meetings that we're hearing about with the Coastal Commission and the local groups and that kind of stuff, what is the process that information gets communicated back out to the public, either by what should happen or what would just be good practice and kind of good policy?
I mean, so yeah, we have monthly meetings. They are over Zoom. They're not recorded. Staff deliberations, staff, administrative drafts of things are not part of the public record. Because that kind of thought process can kind of muddy the waters of things. But I think I do report out the material things that have come out of those meetings in there.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I agree that I've heard you reporting out kind of what you are bringing back and the consensus in that. Yes, we'll see if that feels like enough, and if not, we can go further. Anything else on agenda item number 1? Any comments from the public? We've got a few, 1 or 2 online, and a couple in the room, maybe unrelated. Seeing anything online? All right, coming back to us. Anything else for staff? All right, agenda item number 2, still the Trevor Show.
So this is a fairly straightforward project. It's just in a little bit of a complicated location, sort of makes things a little bit more complicated. So there's a couple issues with it. One is, replacing the septic system. It's a full new system that's required by the UTS program as part of the sale of the property. But because of the sensitivity of the location, both in terms of the geologic stability and the cultural sensitivity of the area, we're including the review of the septic system as part of the CDP, also under the Coastal Act standards, septic modification. And then the deck is of a size and location that it does require a design review. I think it does have minimal potential to impact views, but that's part of the purpose of it. So otherwise, it's really mostly a internal remodeling for the most part of the house, and then maintenance. There's a lot of maintenance, as I understand it, on the house. It is, as I mentioned, in an area of questionable stability is mapped in the general plan. So they did get a geologist to go out and take some samples and look at the site. Found no evidence of instability. The new septic system will be located further away from the edge of the bluff. It's not really a coastal bluff because it's above the harbor parking lot as opposed to above the shoreline. So it's not subject to wave erosion and that sort of thing. And actually the ranch is holding the retaining wall below it right now. So I think stability is probably not much of a factor. And the geologist did have some recommendations about the footings for the deck to make sure it's in native soils as opposed to some of the fill that's there. And then, so some of the conditions are to have a cultural monitor on site, because as we know, there's some resources have been found in the area and known to occur in the area. And otherwise, it's pretty much our standard conditions of approval. The project's not changing setbacks or height or anything like that. And there will be 2 additional parking spaces that they're adding, a little bit of fill and a short retaining wall will go to all of the parking spots. The project also does require a grading permit, so the city engineer will have to review a grading and a full plan. The design review and view protection findings are written in a manner to allow approval. The neighbors have been notified, so if views might be impacted, for example, those should be worded. Let's see. This project was sent out for a referral. The health department wanted to make sure that the new deck footings are at least 5 feet from the perforated portions of the leach line. So that's what's shown here. The part that's under the deck is not a perforated line. It's just to get it out from under the deck. But like I said, the city engineer would like to review the erosion and for drainage and erosion control plan. The Coastal Commission did recommend a couple of conditions for this one. One, because it's visible from beaches, trails, open space areas. They recommended a condition that lighting has to be the wattage and shielded so it doesn't affect other properties, and that that the applicants acknowledge the risk of building in an area that's potentially unstable. So those are pretty standard Coastal Commission conditions. And then also I included the condition for requiring a cultural monitor on site. A few extra maybe pieces for this one, but otherwise pretty straightforward.
Right. Questions from the commissioners for Trevor?
Oh, and then I might add you have an extra sheet on your table in front of you that shows the proposed exterior colors. The metal roof was already.
All right, commissioners, what do you got?
I guess not really being super familiar with like the cultural sensitivity of the area. I mean, you noted that there was no response received from tribal entities when you sent out referrals.
There was no response, but I did when I sent the referral, I did say that I was assuming that they would want a cultural monitor. So I didn't get confirmation of that, but again, there have been, with the city stormwater project, there were resources found during that study in the area, and then we know the trail is in the area. So I think that it's just a situation where
Just have a question on the sheet 101, the site plan. I think I understand that there's a 2-chamber septic tank, and then there is a sump tank as well. Is that a pump tank?
Yeah, so it's a shallow distribution system. Let's see, shallow trench pressure distribution system. And so I I don't know the exact mechanics of it, but because it's the shallow trench and so and the leach lines are going up. So
It's hard to tell from the pictures. It looks like you're going down. To me.
they should actually go parallel to the slope, but they're at different elevations. Again, I'm not exactly sure, but it was engineered. And so.
Well, I think when you said that it's a shallow system, that's what I was missing, I think. Okay.
Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. We've not heard from any neighbors to date. Its dory poles go up. And then my last question is, actually it's a pair of questions. I agree with your assessment that there absolutely should be a cultural monitor present. I was just curious, what gives the city the authority to request that in a condition? Is it the general plan or is there an ordinance?
So, I think it's something that, the city requires for all of its projects at this point, any ground disturbance. I think it's something that has been requested and recognized more and more. And I think it's something that we're probably moving towards having regulatory requirements for. But it is, it's so there's no necessarily policy or regulation that says it has to be in there. I think it's just staff recommended as a condition of approval, just knowing that it's the cultural sensitivity of the area. To remove that condition, you could. If the applicant wants to remove that condition, they could request that or appeal the decision to the city council. So you can request kinds of things and conditions of approval. It's and the applicant can agree to them or not.
Is there some document, I guess of the general plan or municipal codes or someplace where cultural monitors are required? I only ask not specifically for this project, but because of course we are getting to revise the general plan. I'm wondering if that's something that if it's not there, should it be there?
Yeah, I think we are moving in that direction. I think with the LCP update, there will be regulatory requirements. Now, whether it's for all projects or whether it's certain locations or certain projects, I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like. We are actively working on the cultural resources element. Don't recall exactly how specific that gets for cultural monitors. I think it's not in our general plan now because it wasn't on the radar in the 70s.
It would be very reasonable for it to be there considering how well seems afloat. A couple of related questions. Since there's going to be ongoing discussion about the Van Wyck Trail, I'm curious to the recipients of if there's a report from those cultural monitors, who the recipients of that report are, and whether it might be something we could use as we discuss the Van Wyck Trail, which is just a few hundred feet from there.
Yeah, no, there was cultural resource reports for the stormwater project as well as the Van Wyck Trail project when retaining wall was. So those do exist, and redacted versions are in the public file.
I can see those. Okay, thanks. And then one question, why the Rancheria and not another tribal entity? You're off.
Oh, did I say?
BJ, they said that cultural monitor.
Oh, okay, I just copied that from somewhere, so it should be from Rancheria, the Yurok tribe, or the TAS. Thank you.
I have no other questions. Thanks.
I had a few. Let's see. Kind of a question on page 16 of the packet. You talk about the notices not received from the tribal entities. I'm just curious, maybe going forward and for this project, who are the tribal entities, and can we maybe specify those each time just to capture more detail in the record? I think might be a good practice, just that way we know exactly who was notified. And then a follow-up question on that, who is the entity at the, I guess you said there are tribal commission meetings and various groups, and they have their meeting schedule. Are we noticing them in a realistic time frame that allows them the opportunity to provide comment on these projects? Or perhaps are we missing their meeting cycle, and do we need to adjust something in our process to make sure that they have the opportunity within their guidelines to be able to comment on stuff?
So when I send out referrals, I send them to the TIPOs, the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers, and following the protocols for Humboldt County and other entities, the referrals provided 2 weeks. However, they do say if more time is needed, that can be requested.
So they have the opportunity and a mechanism to ask for more time for that. Okay, perfect. All right. And then that parking space that's going on the right-hand corner, the little expansion they're doing, that doesn't take away a potential reserve septic area. It looks far too small to be that. That was my one comment, because I noticed there's no septic, so that makes me a little nervous to. I
did ask that of the health department, and they didn't seem to have concerns about that. There is minimal room for reserve area, but that location there would not be an ideal location.
And then I had a question early in the packet. You talked about making it dark sky compliant, and then condition number 8, where you specify that. Should there be the phrase dark sky compliant? Does that hold? Is there a certification? Is there an entity that signs off and says, because if we're going to head that way potentially as a city, as we revisit those sections?
I was probably being kind of lazy when I said dark sky compliant. There is an organization, and they have recommended best practices, and that's what that is.
Okay.
I use the specific wording that the Coastal Commission recommended.
That's all I have. Thank you. Anybody else?
I just have a general comment that, I appreciate the applicant coming to upgrade their septic system. Anytime someone's upgrading their septic system from a failing system, that's great for me. And it seems like they took into account the high visibility of that property with their choice of improvements. And I guess I appreciate that thought that went into that. And I've noticed that, that house is very visible, and it definitely has deferred maintenance on it. So the missing, it's deferred. The maintenance has been deferred, excuse me. So.
Are you the applicant?
Yes.
If there's an opportunity, if you'd like to speak to the commission, you're welcome now. We'll open it up to you.
Sure.
Then we'll go to public comment. You don't have to.
No, we just came up and, we're really excited to be able to actually obtain this property and, contribute to the city of Trinidad and hopefully make a place that, the whole town finds appealing. Like when you talk about dark sky compliant fixtures, my husband's an electrician. We totally understand that. I'm in construction myself and stuff and everything. So, we really want to have respect for anything that the community has to say and come in as, someone that really wants to be a part of the community. And so we appreciate all of your comments and definitely take them forward. So.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant from the commission? No. All right, thanks.
Thanks. Pleasure to meet you all.
We'll open it up to public comment if there's any person online, and then I think we've accounted for everybody in the room with us.
I think was the agent.
My name's Sarah Atkins. I'm just the agent for Kelly. So no comments here, just here to answer any questions if you have them.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much. Okay, then I'll bring it back to us. Any further discussion from the commissioners? Ready to entertain a motion? I'm happy to make. Okay, all right. Based on the application materials, information, and findings included in the staff report, and based on public testimony, I find that this project is consistent with the Trinidad LCP and other applicable regulations, and I move to adopt the information and required design review, view protection findings in the staff report, and approve the project as described in the staff report and as conditioned herein, with a special note to modify condition number 9 to more generally state the cultural monitor, and not have the specific reference to the rancheria.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item number 3. Vegetation removal.
Okay, so as promised at the last meeting, this staff is proposing to remove vegetation along the proposed alignment at the bottom of the Axel Memorial Trail. The purpose of the vegetation removal is to, one, it would help prepare the trail for eventual public use, but the purpose at this point is to be able to have better access for staff to look at the site, the topography, wet areas, and then primarily the transition of the bluff to the beach. It's as you see in the photos there, it's very thick vegetation. It's difficult to get access, take measurements, those sorts of things. So the intent is to get that cleared up a little bit, basically following the proposal from RCAA. It was originally intended to get that portion of the trail open. We have to figure out a way to get people safely to the beach. So this is the first step in that process. So let's see this. And I provided a little background and history in there that you guys are probably pretty familiar with. Staff is also proposing to place fencing at the toe of the slope, similar, the same as what's at the bottom of the existing alignment, to keep people from trying to climb back up the slope, which could cause additional erosion. And again, it's a safety issue as well. So that is part of the CDP. The project, as written in here again, is consistent with general plan zoning ordinance provisions, as well as the Coastal Act. Because of it's located in the Churai study area, within the open space area, any new structures and vegetation removal requires a use permit. Use permit findings are in there. Fence also requires design review because it's a structure, so those findings are in there as well. And then finally, it requires the policy 69 goals of the State Historic Preservation Officer, the Trinidad Rancheria, and the lineal descendants. Churai and Churai are the ones who we've been working with them. City staff has to develop this proposal, so they are in support. I have sent a letter off to the SHPO to concur as well, and then at the city council meeting last week, they requested government to government consultation on this. So should be a condition there that we receive all those. So yeah, so approval of the Trinidad Rancheria and SHPO shall be commencing, and then the same condition, but the other fence is that it's only authorized to remain as long as the trail closure remains in effect or until the bid. That is the project being proposed, and we're outside just about outside the nesting season, so that shouldn't be an issue like it was last time. The swallows are still over there, but August 15th, it depends on the species. August 15th to September 1st is usually end of the window. And it is something that could occur during the wet season, so take a little bit of time to schedule a meeting with Rancheria Tribal Council, but I don't think that work is just proposed. Not no soil disturbance, so it's not expected to cause erosion.
Thank you, Trevor. Questions for Trevor? Commissioners?
I'll kick it off. So the proposed area where they intend to take the vegetation or remove the vegetation. Do we have any understanding or background as to why that particular route is been chosen? I understand that it is the traditional trail alignment, but is that really as I say it this way, is that indeed the only recourse we have? Or are there other paths to the beach that would be less complicated and still accomplish what the Ancestral Society would want to do and the city would want to do, or all the entities included?
I would say that a third alternative access has not been explored. We do know that the Ancestral Society will not support improvements on the existing alignment, and because of policy 69, that's kind of a dead end. The rock has always been seen as being an important component of the exit of this trail, because it protects the base of the bluff there. There's less erosion there. It provides a stable access point. There has been some additional erosion that has separated that rock from the bluff, and that's where we need to figure out to get people. But so that rock has always been kind of the key for the exit of the trail, and we have not explored.
Yeah, so there was the report that was prepared by GHD, and in the report, working with the Chura Ancestral Society, GHD, and came up with this particular path. So it's been identified as a traditional path. And that's our city engineer was actually the lead on that. It's not like, he was doing it on behalf of the city. He was doing it as a separate project. So otherwise, we certainly can't go any further from the current position of the trail. And when you go any further west from the proposed section of the trail, that seems to get even more dicey, because that, I think, is more of the area where, if you look at the top where it is eroding, I think it's going down pretty much lower. And in between the two, it's the same drop between where the existing trail is and where the traditional trail is. So when you're down there, there isn't any spot that you could really look at that looks like it's going lower or be more gradual and possibly less intrusive approach. So it just leaves us with these two, and because it is in the study area, the Chura said that they're concerned with the existing one, even beyond the fact that it is safe, but that it's unsafe, rather, the safety issue. But, also that people tend to somehow meander off of that and get further into the area, sensitive areas. So it just makes sense that if we're going to be doing some improvements, that we do them in where the traditional area is. That sure I like to see it done there. And we just are concerned about how can we get to having the closed trail become open. And whatever steps we can take in that direction to get it open, that's what we're pursuing.
I'll also add that there were several studies done when the trail was originally, improved in 97, 98. And I imagine there's a reason that it didn't go straight down, that both go off either east or west. And I think part of the importance of the public or the traditional alignment, as Eli mentioned, is that the traditional alignment is not going to have cultural resources underneath it. So is the ideal location for the trail.
Just that I would be concerned that, or am concerned that once we clear the brush, that we're going to find that maybe that isn't the answer, solution to this, which would be unfortunate. And I don't know if there's an alternative that we've been able to identify.
So approximately maybe 3 months ago, we had a meeting with our CAA and myself and Sarah Lindgren of the Ancestral Society. And we were present the whole time that the crew from RCAA, which at that point was 2 people, but they followed the way that path would be. They used the machete and they cleared through that area. And it seemed feasible and logical, other than there is a certain point where there is some drainage and it may need some kind of a so-called land bridge or just planks to cross over that area. But other than that, it seemed quite feasible until they got towards the bottom. And then they realized that there's no real connection to the beach, to that boulder. Because originally there was like a little land bridge to the boulder. And there still is a land bridge to the boulder, only it's about maybe 1.5 feet wide. So people can't really navigate that. And that's why we're looking at how can we safely get people down there. And GHD has been looking through our city engineer about the short-term fix. And it may not be exactly as the long-term fix, but it'll be in the same area. And it's just, how we get people safely. He was indicating, our city engineer, about, what could be done with the boulder and to connect with the boulder and having some kind of steps or some kind of a bridge. But yes, if our CAA, with the presence of the Churai and myself, hadn't, used the machete and gone down the way the path is intended, then I might have more of the concerns that you have.
So thanks for the.
I've got a related question if you don't mind. Again, it's somewhat unclear to me, based on the information we've got and this discussion now, whether, I forget where I encountered this term, right? But there's this goal to get down to the nucleus of the village sites. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I've encountered the word nucleus somewhere as we've. Yes.
Well, so the nucleus of the village itself is to the east of this trail, and so that's part of the concern of the existing alignment, is that it takes people too close. That where resources would be.
Yeah, so I guess I'm confused at the moment then whether the goal is to just get people away from the most sensitive regions at the toe of the bluff, or whether there's actually profound sort of spiritual, cultural meaning to exiting the bluff at that rock. Because I mean, if there's this, again, I'm sorry, I forget where I kind of this term, if there's this nucleus, like how wide is this nucleus? Could we theoretically go 10, 15 feet west or 10, 15 feet east? Is the goal really to terminate the trail at that rock or just be further away from the most sensitive areas?
I think it's both. I would say it's actually primarily to get it back to the traditional alignment again, because there would not be burials or other resources that would be located right along the alignment. For one, and two, it is a ceremonial trail. It is a tribal cultural resource, so the traditional alignment is important.
The rock is part of that, to your knowledge.
That would be that's my understanding.
I've got a handful of questions, but I'll defer if anyone else feels more pressing related. Is it possible to assess the condition of the proposed trail with remote sensing, like IR mapping or something? I mean, that's probably rather expensive, but it's less hassle than a bunch of trampling in a sensitive area with machetes and chainsaws.
I did ask about, well, this was more in terms of mapping the bluff and stability and bluff movement, but I was asking if, that could be done with, a drone or LiDAR or something like that. And I think that at a broad scale, that would be more feasible, but, at this very small scale, that is not a viable option.
And then I think this is my last question, but it's my most verbose question, and I'm going to, return to the topic of trail maintenance. And I think there's a number of reasons to be concerned about the lack of maintenance on the trail at the moment. For example, from the bottom of the existing trail, you can see the English ivy creeping into where the trail used to be. And I think that more generally, there's this lack of maintenance that's potentially harming both the environmental and cultural resources in the area surrounding the present, not prospective alignment of the trail. But I'm also concerned because at our January 17th meeting, Mr. Gallegos came in, the legal counsel for the TAS, and I thought that was a really informative and really compelling appearance. But in the letter that he shared, there was the following statement, and I'll read from that letter directly. The extensive damage to the trail over the years through missing steps, extreme erosion, and the use of voluntary trails to go around the lower portion of the trail makes, quote, short-term repair impossible without extensive ground disturbing activities. This does not fall under emergency permitting and is subject to policy 69, as this is an entirely new project. The lower portion of the trail no longer exists, and therefore is beyond seasonal maintenance as described in the TMP and no longer exempt from the coastal development permit. Whether we believe that to be true or not, I'm aware of the possibility that a lack of maintenance might be used to rationalize prolonged or continued closure of the trail. And I mentioned all of that because this plan is going to be before tribal entities. So I wanted to at least introduce the possibility that this permit also allows for continued maintenance and repair, including vegetation removal and perhaps stair repair for the existing trail from at least the entrance to the point where the current trail intersects with the proposed trail. And if there's the potential for objection to ground disturbing activities, we should explore those objections now.
Yes, so being on site with Sarah Lindgren of the Chari Ancestral Society, and at a prior meeting, we also were on site with her and with Sherry Humboldt from the Yurok tribe, and along with another person from, I think, their trails person, or one of their trails people from the Yurok tribe. for a short-term fix, they all seem to be fine with the fact that, leading up to where we would divert to the traditional trail, that whatever improvements needed to be made in the interim, meaning replacing some steps, that would be fine. Because the long-term trail will still follow that same path all the way down. And knowing that if we do want to open it in the short term, we want to make it safe so that people do not trip on their way down because either the steps were missing or the steps needed repair.
Yeah, I mean, that was long and rambling, but I guess I'll just sort of explicitly ask whether there's interest in amending the CDP to also allow for things like stair replacement or vegetation removal on the existing trail so that it's something that tribal entities have an opportunity to discuss.
I mean, there was some vegetation maintenance earlier in the summer in order to allow RCA to get down the trail. That did occur. We haven't really discussed whether to start on maintenance of the rest of the trail. My hesitation on that would be that it would encourage people to try and go around the fencing and use the trail if it looked really clear and maintained. And replacing steps now, is that really the best timing to do things? We haven't really discussed it. But I mean, you are right in that there is an amount of deferred maintenance that then crosses the line into not being maintenance. But I think but in this area, almost anything requires a CDP. And so at some point, we're going to have to come back for a CDP to do those improvements in the bottom. And that would be the time to include the steps and things like that.
Well, to that last comment, if what would be done would be to repair existing trail infrastructure, why would that require a CDP? Just replacement of existing development. Because
almost any repair within 50 feet of or on a bluff is going to require a CDP. So repair and maintenance, there are, in the Coastal Act, there's an exemption for repair and maintenance, but then in the regulations, it kind of qualifies what repair and maintenance requires a permit. So things on a beach and so many feet of a bluff, those sorts of things, even if they're repair and maintenance required.
Okay. So it would be necessarily easy to slip some stair repair terms into this.
I mean, you are issuing a CDP. I would recommend against that because, again, I think, the policy 69 does not really differentiate between maintenance. And, I don't know how the city has dealt with stair repairs in the past and whether it has gotten those policy 69 approvals, or policy 69 says there shall be no soil disturbance without. And so, even replacing stairs, I think, is soil disturbance. And the way I've described this, to the Ancestral Society and the SHPO, adding additional soil disturbance might, wherever you're noticing them.
Just to that point, I appreciate what I think you're intended to try and pack as much opportunity into the CDP as possible. Personally, I think given for me the sensitivity of this area and all the interested parties, I would not be in support of adding more things in like that. I feel like the noticing and the work proposed is very specific and very narrow. And I think that's probably, I'm going to guess, what helped get all parties to agree to move forward with this. And that, again, while I appreciate the desire to have as many drawers possible to open the toolbox, so to speak, that we've only got a 3-drawer toolbox here, and to add a couple more would feel disingenuous to me, regardless of the intent, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, I fully appreciate that. I also am sort of fearful of a bridge to nowhere type situation where we suddenly find out that there is opposition to some aspect of maintaining or repairing the upper part of the trail, which, I mean, and I'm just totally speculating, and that may not be a reasonable thing to do, but I'm fearful of it.
I appreciate that. I happen to have the management plan open. It is one of the documents I went back to get ready for this meeting, and very consistently stated in there specific to this trail as a desire by TAS to have this reopened and have it realigned to the traditional path. So I feel like at least since 2007, from a documentary evidentiary standpoint, and I feel like that's been a consistent message.
I agree with you.
Awesome.
Well, I had a similar question, I guess. I mean, and maybe it's already been answered, but so when the brush is removed, we'll be able to get down to the edge from the top and the bottom. I mean, surely there's already a couple of designs floating around in the discussion of how we want to create this temporary fix to get from the bluff edge onto the rock or down to the beach next to the rock or something like that. And I guess my comment or question, well, mostly a comment, I guess, was like, I sort of wish that in this permit, say there's 3 different options that are getting floated around, and we need to remove the brush to figure out which one is the best one. Like, I wish those would have been packed in here, so that way into this CDP, and obviously it's too late now, but just so that way it's like, okay, we remove the brush. We've got these 3 options that are already permitted from a planning standpoint, not from an engineering standpoint or something like that. And then it's like, okay, now it's clear to us, option 2 is the one to use, and we could just do it instead of it having to come back to us and like go through this whole process again. I guess I wish it was more of a package deal, and it could have included maintenance for the steps, but that's more of my comment. More of a comment than a question. And then a follow-up comment that's somewhat related. Or maybe it's a request. So that is that when we do get the brush cleared and powers that be are deciding what the best approach to get from the bluff down to the beach is near the rock or on the rock. I think Richard made a good point at our previous meeting a month ago that, we've got the city engineer involved, and engineers like to engineer things. And I would request that A is present who might have like a more practical, simpler approach to solving that solution. And I guess I request that because given that that's an area that receives a lot of wave action and storm action, and maybe there's some instability, whatever, I think having a simple solution there can benefit the city tremendously in the long term, because as we've seen in like the Van Wyck Trail, when city infrastructure fails, it becomes a liability for the city. And if you have a really complex thing that's super engineered, it still could fail. And if it's more complex, it's going to make it more difficult to fix. And I guess all I'm asking for is just like, try to keep it simple, at least with the temporary solution. Obviously, we haven't seen the long-term solution yet. And I just don't know that the engineer solution is going to be the best solution. So I would like to keep that. Other voices in the room who might have other feel for that. It will benefit the city liability standpoint and the residents from being able to use the trail without it getting closed.
A good point. I think it would be good to have RCAA included in the discussions. And I'll also note that Mayor Kelly has reached out to state parks. They've recently been doing some work at College Cove and other locations, and is going to consult with them on their options as well. So.
Yes. I'm just thankful that it's moving forward and let's get it built as fast as possible. It's not that tricky to build the trail. But I do see in the Google map here where it's called Trinidad Bay Memorial Park. What is that?
I did, yes.
Is there an official name on that?
I don't know. I don't think the city adopted it.
I'm thinking they're referring to where at the top where the Civic Club had the lighthouse and where they have the all of the names of the people lost at sea. That's like a memorial park there. I just don't know about the words Trinidad Bay.
It's in the paperwork. You can pull it up and see it. But yeah, just pointing it out that we might want to look at that at some point. Because it does kind of look like it's down in the hill.
I do know, I mean, there's a lot of errors on Google Maps in Trinidad. And I know the city's been trying to get some of them fixed for many years. To no avail.
Great, thanks.
Just to Tom's point, that's a great catch. I have Google Maps and I clicked on it and there's a bunch of different pictures, one of which does include the lost at sea plaques, but there's a phone number, 677-0101. I have no idea who that is. It might be somebody to follow up with and find out who answers that number. And see if that's the Civic Club. I don't know, just if they know about that. I had a couple questions and comments. Like Tom said, I'm encouraged that there's progress and I see this request as movement forward on something that I've personally been incredibly frustrated by for the length this has been in front of us. And so I kind of see this as, let's get this vegetation cleared so that then we can see what is or isn't there, what may or may not be concerning. It is interesting though, in reviewing the management plan, there's a bullet point in here on page 57 that talks about rerouting the lower portion of the trail as possible. However, the area is highly saturated and bluff in this area is also failing. In addition, this route would require extensive armoring of the surface with rock and the need of a bridge structure approximately 30 to 40 feet in length. Therefore, the project is possible would be costly. I'm just curious if that was a bridge to the existing rock. Was this identified in 2007? And just, I don't know, we're moving forward. That's great, but maybe there was a missed opportunity to have learned some stuff from the past.
I believe that bridge is over, I think they call it Furwood Creek, that is what comes out there. So I think that's what that bridge is. I don't know whether they actually, how much they got on the ground.
Yeah, I don't know if any of the parties that were involved with that then would have any recollection, not that it would have any significant meaning. I did have a comment on the use permit findings on packet page 44 under number 3. You talk about noxious odor, expressions of emissions, noise, glare, dust, and odor. In the RCA bid, they specifically mentioned the use of chainsaws. So I didn't know if that needed to be changed there. I would recommend that it does get changed, just that way what we're approving reflects what RCA is saying they're going to be using tool-wise. So there's no surprise. Hey, you said there was no noise or emissions. But there are, from a chainsaw. I think that was really the only thing that jumped out at me.
They're using electric chainsaws.
Could be electric chainsaws. You're absolutely right. I assume that their bid does not specify internal combustion engine.
You could reword that to be, short-term temporary use of.
Suggesting the proposed project will not involve any long-term emissions or
I mean, you could
noise.
say it's not gonna cause noise dust or glare, dust and odor, noise will be short-term, temporary.
Next, I don't have anything else. Anything else from the commissioners? And then we'll open it to the public. I don't see anybody online or in the room anymore. Then that can bring it back to us. Although I do want to note there was public comment again from Kathleen Lake on this. Just commenting that any extension to the CDPs allowing our trails to continue to be closed have become a regular occurrence and must stop. She's advocating for denial of the CDP tonight to not allow continued fencing of the actual Memorial Trail. Trails and easement granted by the Coastal Conservancy. And then again, a request for communication with the Coastal Conservancy and their stance on the actual Memorial Trail. And then a request also to continue to report out, you know, I think we had to, specifically about trail maintenance, and I think there was some discussion about that tonight that I'm comfortable with. So I just wanted to make note that we did receive that one comment, and I see Eli coming up.
I just wanted to know regarding the Coastal Conservancy that they are a member of the shoreline management team. So whenever we have the shoreline management team meetings, they're present. So their viewpoint is reflected in those meetings.
And again, I think I would suggest not to put words in Kathleen's mouth, but that it's getting report outs of detailed things that can be reported out is, I know I personally feel like that's been missing, and I have not heard a whole lot of that from TMT meetings. And I recognize the cultural sensitivities and things that absolutely cannot and should not be reported out. But I think there are things that probably could and should get reported out that don't fall into the lack of the more appropriate word, protected information. And I think that's a big opportunity for the city to make huge strides forward. I encourage them to continue to work towards that. I sound like a commitment from Mayor Kelly at the council meeting to do that. I hope that not having a seat at those tables necessarily, it sounds like that whoever is at those tables for these meetings does understand the direction from the mayor and report that information out. So. All right.
So I do have a kind of an unrelated, but maybe related question. It has to do with city manager. I know that Eli will be retiring soon. But and that I believe happens next month. Is that correct, Eli?
My existing contract ends in September, and that was the original intent. However, I did indicate to the council that I'd be willing to stay month to month. I believe we'll have that on the agenda for the September meeting. So until we transition and someone in place.
That was exactly my concern. So thank you. I appreciate that. I just was looking for a point of contact if and when you were not around, because this would fall in the cracks very quickly. So thank you.
Sure.
Anything else from the commissioners? If not, then I think we're ready to entertain a motion. Gonna take a stab at it. Nobody else is raring to.
I can do it.
Okay. I would just.
You've got language about.
Yeah, I had just kind of generalized that I can chime in when we get to that at the end of the motion here. I'm just going to say changes to the use permit findings number 3 to reflect the potential for short-term use of tools with the brush clearing.
You should make a motion.
Okay. All right. Based on application materials and information included in the staff report and based on public testimony, I find that the project is consistent with the city's certified LCP, other applicable regulations, and I move to adopt the information in this staff report and approve the project as described in this staff report and as conditioned therein with changes to use permit findings number 3 to reflect potential for short-term use of tools and whatnot with the brush clearing. Second. Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, passes unanimously 5-0. Where I have an agenda here. Commissioner reports. Any commissioners with things to report? All right.
Should we, just for the record, mention that we contacted the council for prior to the previous meeting, that many of us were in attendance for that. I don't know that it really matters, but.
I'm not clear on what you're.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, just so that it's in the minutes someplace, should we mention that, you on our behalf drafted a memo to the city council and many of us were in attendance for their previous council meeting?
Sure, yeah, I mean, based off our previous meeting, that I went ahead and drafted a letter from the commission to the council. And it was submitted as comment for their consideration during their review of the appeal or the action on the appeal of the for denial, and then also that 4 of the 5 commissioners were present in the room that night as members of the audience. So, sorry, yeah. Anything else from commissioners? All right, staff report, Trevor.
Finally through my backlog of applications, I think. A couple, 2 small ones coming up. So I'm able to, and I got through with REAP and the OPC grant stuff. So now I'm back to working on the LCP update. So I submitted a draft visitor services study to the Coastal Commission. I started to work on the safety element and incorporating some of the recommendations from the Community Coastal Resiliency Plan into the safety element. Also, I have someone working on the cultural resources element, addressing tribes. So working on those things. Jennifer took a new job and is still working with the city a few hours a week to focusing on little BTS permits. So I'm still working with BTS permits. Trails issues.
Okay. Questions? No. Any updates on future agenda items? Just the one I added last week or last month about the land use. I'm still gathering information on that. Reached out to a few people to try some draft ones and then get this to Trevor so we can kind of try and vet that and still proceed with that if we choose.
I'm just going to mention for that particular item that if you go to HCOG, I don't know, I'm pretty sure that the HCOG, the full council has one, but the SS TAC clearly has one. That's the social services TAC. That's a pretty good one. Then also RCEA has one as well, and they're almost the same. You know, might be something that was adopted across, but yeah, there are 2 good ones there. So you want to look there, there's a place to start.
It's great. Anything else for future agenda items? All right, in that case, I believe we are adjourned.